Okay, so first we're going to go ahead and pour our chocolate spheres. This is going to be part of the structure that holds the bowls up in the air and makes them look so magical. I have a 10-inch sphere pan and an 8-inch sphere pan because I need quite a lot of cake, but if you were making a smaller cake, you could use an 8-inch and a 6-inch. And I'm going to put these on top of a slightly smaller cake pan so that I can tilt them at the correct angle. And then I have here an 8-inch cake board, a wooden cake board from Cake Boards of Air, and a 6-inch cake board. And I'm using wooden ones because we're going to be drilling through these, and chocolate will probably be strong enough to hold up these cakes, but I don't want to take a chance. So I'm using the chocolate sphere to create the bottom of the cake, but the wooden part of the board is going to be what the majority of the structure is. So I'm going to place some plastic wrap into the bottom of my bowl just to help the chocolate come out a little bit easier. And I've just melted down some chocolate Milties. These are just milk chocolate. You can use white or dark or whatever you have. I buy mine from the bulk section at Winco because they're cheap. So you could use chocolate bark, just something really cheap. You could also use styrofoam if you wanted to, and you had like the right sizes, but to me this is easier than cutting styrofoam. So when we put this board into the bowl, we don't want to go straight up and down because we're actually going to be tilting this bowl. It's going to look like it's tipping out a little bit. So I'm going to take my bowl and tilt it this way. It doesn't have to be a ton, so just like that much. And with the wooden board on top, you can really see kind of like how much it's tilted. So if you tilted it like a lot, then it would look very dynamic. But I'm just going to tilt mine a little bit. About that much. I'm going to start pouring in some chocolate. This is probably about 2 cups. I'll weigh it. And you just want the chocolate to be touching your board so that it makes a good connection. So that's not quite full enough yet. Barely touching. Just going to smooth this chocolate all over the base just to kind of make sure it all connects. And I have a little hole cut into the center of my board to just make it a little bit easier for me to grab. Just make sure your plastic wrap is all tight. You can see that's level. Take out that little excess chocolate that's oozing out the top. And then I'm going to put this into the fridge to fully set up. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the 6-inch. This one I put a little bit too much chocolate in, so I'm scooping out some of it. Make sure it's tilted. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and start putting together our structure. I have here an 18-inch cake board from Cake Boards of Air. You definitely want to use a nice heavy wide cake board so it's nice and stable. We're going to be attaching this cake structure to the board using 3/8-inch threaded rod, which is pretty thick. And I want it to be a few inches off the board, but not so tall that it's going to be really unstable. So I'm going to trim this down, putting on my safety glasses, and I'm going to cut my threaded rod using a Dremel tool and a metal cutting device. I talk more about cutting threaded rod in the introduction to cake sculpting video. We are going to cut another piece, but I'm going to attach this to the board first. I'm going to try and center my cake, and I'm going to put the threaded rod as close to the edge of the bowl as possible. Okay, so this is sitting in the bowl and it's slightly tilted, and what I'm going to do is start drilling down straight through. Once you get to the chocolate, stop, because you don't want to damage your pan. But drilling it inside the bowl is going to help you get the right angle. Just going to finish drilling through, following the angle. Okay. So now I'm going to put my chocolate sphere back in the bowl, get it situated. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trim the dome off my cake. And I'm just going to carve a little bit of the edge away so it kind of fits into the bowl. Since our cake is bowl shaped, not straight up and down, you only have to do it to this one layer. That should fit in there pretty well. I might need to trim it down a little bit more. You'll see why we're doing this in a second. And then put that here. Because our pan is at an angle, you know, it barely reaches the top here, but then it's overflowing right here. So what I'm going to do is take my knife and just trim that off so it's flat. Careful of your fingers. So that's the angle of our bowl. So we can take this cake out for now. Get that lined up. Just make a little mark where I'm going to drill right there. And then I'm using my 3/8 inch drill bit to drill a hole through my cake board. And then going to take my nut, my 3/8 inch nut, put that right on the end, just until it's flush. And then take a washer, put that over the top, come up through the bottom, push that through, and then come in with another washer. This washer is 1.5 inches wide and has a 3/8 inch hole in the middle. And then we're going to put on a locking washer. This just keeps the threaded rod from wiggling around once we start actually frosting the cake. So it's very important that you have that. And then another nut. Got 2 wrenches here. I'm going to lock the one onto the bottom to just hold it in place. And then use the top one to tighten until the locking washer is flat. So now I'm going to do a little bit of surgery on my chocolate here. I want to make a little bit of a hole inside my chocolate to make room for the nut so that it's not poking out. And chocolate's pretty easy to carve away, so you should be able to cut away some of that chocolate, no problems. And it doesn't really matter how much chocolate you cut away, because remember, there's a board in here that is really holding everything together. So then we're going to take our nut, put that on, and then take our board. And you want to bring it to the point where you can see just a little bit of the threaded rod sticking above the board. That's pretty well concealed. And then I put my washer on, and then my locking washer, and then my second nut. And then same thing as before, use your pliers to just grab onto that nut down there and then tighten. As I'm tightening that nut has pushed its way all the way up through the chocolate. So now it's up actually against the board, which is great because that's going to be very sturdy. Oh no, thought that might happen. Okay. All right, chocolate popped off from the pressure of attaching that. So I'm going to melt down some chocolate and reattach it. Got some melted chocolate here. I'm just gonna coat the board and reattach that little guy that detached himself. I thought about deleting it and I thought, well, you know, this might happen to somebody, so I'll just leave it in just in case. Sometimes things happen, you gotta fix them. Shouldn't take too long for that to set again. I'm going to cover this threaded rod with some aluminum foil tape. Aluminum foil tape you can get in the air conditioning area at Home Depot or online. It's just aluminum foil tape or foil tape. It's non-toxic and it kind of just protects your cake from basically the metal. Before we add our cake, we're going to have to add the next threaded rod. That's going to be our 8-inch cake. So I'm going to drill down through the cake like we did before. Should have drilled this hole before I attached everything, but mind is not thinking today. Hopefully we don't pop off the chocolate this time. I'm going to trim it all the way down to the board. Okay. So I've just trimmed all of the chocolate away from the base of the board right there. So my second threaded rod is going to go right here. This piece of threaded rod is 12 inches. I'm just going to go place that right there on the bottom. Push it all the way up so it's touching the board. Put the washer, the locking washer, and the nut. Okay, I'm just tightening down that nut. I can't really get my pliers over in here, so I'm just holding on to the threaded rod up here to keep it from spinning, because if this nut and washer are not completely flat, then it's going to start wiggling, and that once it starts wiggling, it's over. You can't come back from that. Cover that metal. Actually going to go up a little bit too, and then we can start adding on our cake. Just a little buttercream on top. I'm using buttercream to fill in all my gaps and to do all of my icing, but you could use ganache if you wanted it to be a little bit more firm. Just going around and filling in all those edges. If you need to trim down your cake, you can. Put a little bit more tape up here, and then a nice layer of buttercream. So then our second layer of cake with the thicker side over towards this pole. That's going to create our kind of tilted look. And then we can do a nice crumb coat on that. And you can go ahead and cover all of the chocolate, fill in that little gap right there from where we carved out the buttercream. Just cover the whole thing, and that's going to help the fondant to stick. And then I'm going to use my acetate smoother to just smooth out that buttercream. This is just the crumb coat, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but it is nice for it to be a little bit smoother since I'm going to let this chill in the fridge overnight before I put my second coat on. This is a thin acetate smoother from Innovative Sugar Works. It's perfect for getting smooth edges on curved cakes.